The dog didn't growl at her. That was the first thing everyone noticed. He had growled at every single person who walked through the door of the Rideau Valley Animal Hospital that Tuesday morning. The receptionist who tried to hand over a clipboard, the teenage volunteer who'd come around the corner too fast, even Dr. Emmett, who had been working with military working dogs for 11 years and usually had a way about him that animals seemed to trust on instinct. But when Sergeant Callum— no, wait, wrong name. Start over. The dog's name was Kodiak, and he weighed 38 kilograms of pure muscle and suspicion. His handler, Master Corporal Brandt, had warned everyone before they even stepped close. He'd said it in that flat, rehearsed way that suggested he'd said it many times before, in many rooms, to many people who thought they knew better. Don't approach him. Don't reach toward him. Don't make eye contact unless I tell you to. Nobody argued. Kodiak was a Belgian Malinois, retired, technically, though his body hadn't gotten that memo. He stood beside Brandt's leg with the stillness of something coiled, his dark eyes moving across the waiting room of the Rideau Valley Animal Hospital with the kind of methodical attention that made people instinctively take a step back. Brandt himself was in civilian clothes, jeans, a gray Henley, but he carried himself like he was still in uniform, like the rank was built into his spine rather than sewn onto a shoulder. He was 32, maybe 33. Square jaw. The particular kind of stillness that came not from calm but from very controlled tension. He had a scar along his left forearm that disappeared under his sleeve, and he kept his right hand close to Kodiak's lead at all times, not gripping it exactly, just present. He had not smiled since walking in. The receptionist, a kind woman named Bev, who had been working the front desk for 14 years, had offered him a seat and a cup of water, and he had declined both without looking at her. He was not being rude, exactly. He was somewhere else. You could see it in the way his eyes moved, efficient threat assessing, in a waiting room that held nothing more dangerous than a tabby cat in a carrier and an elderly man with a Shih Tzu. Kodiak had a limp, left front leg. It had been there for 3 days, and Brandt had waited that long to come in because he'd wanted to believe it would resolve on its own, which was the kind of thing people told themselves when they were afraid of what the answer might be. Sloane Adler came through the side door at 7:43 in the morning, 12 minutes before her shift technically started, because she always did. She had a coffee from the Tim Hortons 2 blocks over, double-double, which she'd been meaning to switch to black for 2 years now. And her dark hair was pulled back in the particular way of someone who had put it up in the car without a mirror and was fine with however it turned out. She was 29. She'd been a registered veterinary technician at Rideau Valley for 4 years, before which she'd spent 2 years at a clinic in Winnipeg, before which she'd done something else entirely that she didn't bring up at work unless someone specifically asked. She heard Kodiak before she saw him. Not a growl, just a shift, a low, almost subsonic change in the quality of the air in the waiting room that she registered the way you registered a change in weather. She paused in the hallway, set her coffee on the counter, and looked through the narrow window that faced the waiting area. Belgian Malinois. Military working dog, she could tell from the way he held himself, the specific flatness of his gaze, the fact that he wasn't looking around the room with curiosity, but scanning it. And the handler, civilian clothes over military posture, hand loose on the lead, face closed off in that particular way she recognized and knew better than to mistake for arrogance alone. She went around to the front. Brandt looked up when she walked in. He assessed her the way he assessed everything, quickly, categorically. A vet tech in scrubs, young, no particular authority. "I'll let Dr. Emmett know you're here," Bev was saying from behind the desk. "He'll be with you in about 10 minutes. "Fine," Brandt said. Sloane crouched down. Not moving toward Kodiak, just lowering herself to his level, the way you might if you were looking for something you'd dropped on the floor. She kept her eyes angled slightly away from him and her body sideways, non-confrontational, and she stayed there. Brandt watched her. "He won't let you near him." "I know," she said. She wasn't looking at the dog. She was looking at a spot on the floor about a meter to his left, and she stayed very still. Brandt's jaw tightened slightly. He'd said it, he'd warned her, and she just kept going, and that was the kind of thing that tended to make him deeply uncomfortable because it usually preceded someone getting bitten. "He's a retired MWD. He's not a pet, he doesn't." Kodiak moved. Not fast. Not like a lunge. He took 2 slow steps away from Brandt's leg, enough slack in the lead that Brandt felt it go slightly loose in his hand, and lowered his head toward Sloane. Just his head. His nose moved toward her outstretched fingers. She'd extended one hand at some point, slowly, without drawing attention to it, and he sniffed, twice. And then he pressed his forehead against her palm. The waiting room went very quiet. Bev, behind the desk, stopped typing. The old man with the Shih Tzu made a small sound. Brandt stared at his dog. At the 38 kilograms of trained military working animal who had snapped at a colonel last spring and who required a specific handling protocol and who had not, to Brandt's knowledge, voluntarily initiated contact with a stranger in. He couldn't even calculate how long. Sloane kept her hand still. She let Kodiak push into it at his own pressure. She didn't reach up to pet him, didn't move closer, didn't do anything except be there. After a moment, she said quietly, "What's his name?" Brandt answered before he'd decided to. "Kodiak, Kodiak." She said it once, low, not to him, to the dog, just letting him hear his name from someone new. Kodiak's tail moved, not the full wag of a happy pet, something smaller, more careful. But it moved. Brandt said nothing, doctor. Emmett came in and assessed Kodiak's leg with Brandt present, and Sloane hovering at the useful periphery, handling equipment and anticipating needs in the quiet, competent way that good technicians had, the kind of presence that made everything go smoother without calling attention to itself. Kodiak was tense during the examination. He always was with strangers putting hands on his body, but twice he glanced toward Sloane, which was not nothing. The diagnosis was a soft tissue injury to the carpus, likely from an uneven landing, not a break, not degenerative. Treatable with rest, a support wrap, and anti-inflammatories. Brandt received this information with his arms crossed and his chin down, listening to every word, asking 2 precise questions. Then he said, "What's the prognosis for his working capacity?" Dr. Emmett hesitated. "He's retired, yes?" "Yes. Then his working capacity isn't." "His capacity to function," Brandt said. "His range, his mobility, long-term." Dr. Emmett said that with proper care and a few follow-up appointments, there was no reason Kodiak shouldn't return to full mobility. Brandt nodded. The tension in his shoulders didn't leave exactly, but it reorganized itself. Sloane was wrapping Kodiak's leg. He'd allowed her to do it, which Dr. Emmett had noticed and visibly decided not to comment on. And she said, without looking up, "He's going to need the wrap changed every 2 days. And someone should walk him gently, 15 minutes, morning and evening. Not vigorous, just enough to keep the joint moving." "I know how to manage a dog," Brandt said. It came out flatter than he'd meant it to, maybe. "I know you do," Sloane said. She tied off the wrap and sat back. "I'm just saying what the rehab looks like." Brandt looked at her. He had the sense that he'd been slightly rude just now and that she'd absorbed it with the particular ease of someone who was used to it and didn't particularly care. It was an uncomfortable thing to recognize in a person. "Sorry," he said after a beat. He didn't apologize often enough that it came out smooth. It came out a little rough, like something retrieved from a place it wasn't usually kept. "It's fine," Sloane said, and meant it. He came back 2 days later for the wrap change. He'd called ahead. Bev took the call and asked specifically if Sloane Adler would be available. Bev had said yes, she was on until 5, and then she'd relayed this to Sloane with a particular look that Sloane declined to acknowledge. Brandt arrived at 10 after 2. He had Kodiak on the lead and a Tim Hortons bag in his other hand, which he set on the front desk without ceremony and said for whoever before going to sit in the same chair he'd used on Tuesday. He was wearing the same gray Henley. Sloane came through the side door, and Kodiak got up. Not frantically. Kodiak didn't do anything frantically, but he stood and his attention moved entirely to her, ears forward, and Brandt felt the lead go taut in a different direction than usual. "Hey, Cody," she said, and crouched again. The same posture as before, unhurried, low, and Kodiak walked straight to her. Brandt followed. The wrap change was quick and efficient. Kodiak was patient in a way he wasn't always patient. Sloane talked to him while she worked. Low, matter-of-fact things, telling him what she was doing before she did it, which was a habit Brandt recognized from somewhere. "You talk to him like a handler," he said. She glanced up briefly. "I know." He waited to see if she'd say more. She didn't. After a moment, he said, "You were in the forces." It wasn't a question. She'd heard the particular certainty of it before, from other people, and she'd found different ways to respond to it depending on the person. With Brandt, she felt the calculus was different. 12 Platoon, 2nd Battalion PPCLI, she said. Medic. Got out in 2019. She kept her eyes on Kodiak's leg. Brandt was quiet for a moment. Then Petawawa, Shiloh first, then Petawawa. I was at Petawawa in 18. She looked up then, just briefly. I know, she said. I recognized you. First day. Something moved across his face. Not quite surprise, he was too controlled for that, but something that shifted the balance of whatever he'd been holding. You didn't say anything, he said. You didn't need me to. He sat with that for a moment. Did we? No. You were JTF too. I was attached to the med section. Different buildings. She tied off the wrap and straightened up. But I knew who you were. He came back for the third appointment, and then he called about a question he had about Kodiak's food. Was the reduced appetite normal given the anti-inflammatories? And Bev put him through to Sloane, who told him yes, it was, and to try warming the food slightly, which often helped. He called again a week later, ostensibly about Kodiak's mobility, but Kodiak's mobility by that point was clearly improving, and both of them knew the call wasn't really about that. Bev, who had been watching all of this from her desk with the quiet, comprehensive attention of a woman who had seen everything in 14 years, said nothing to anyone. But she kept making sure Sloane was the one who picked up when that particular number came in. The fourth appointment was for a reassessment. Dr. Emmett pronounced Kodiak's leg healed and his prognosis excellent, and then said he'd leave them to do a final wrap check, and walked out with the particular diplomatic efficiency of someone who understood when he was not necessary. Brandt stood in the examination room with Kodiak at his side, and Sloane washing her hands at the sink, and he said, I want to ask you something. Okay, she said. When I came in the first time, and you crouched down like that, you weren't afraid of him at all. No, most people are. Most people haven't worked with MWDs. She turned from the sink and dried her hands. Or they don't know how to read them. Kodiak wasn't going to bite me. He was confused and in pain, and he didn't know what to do with a room full of strangers. That's different from aggression. Brandt looked at her. How did you know that? That quickly? She thought about it, actually thought about it. He could see her do it, which was a thing he'd noticed about her, that she didn't give automatic answers. Because he was leaning away from everything instead of toward it. Defensive, not offensive. And he kept looking at you for cues, which meant he wasn't in a reactive state. He was waiting to see what you'd do. She paused. Also, he smelled hospital and he was in pain, and animals in pain don't usually attack unless they feel cornered. He didn't feel cornered by me because I made myself small. Brandt was quiet for a long moment. I spent 8 months, he said, trying to get him to warm up to the dog trainer the regiment recommended. She was good, experienced. He wouldn't let her near him. Different energy, Sloane said. Dogs read intention. She probably wanted to work him, and he knew it. I didn't want anything from him. And now? Now I like him, she said simply, and he knows that too. Kodiak, as if to confirm this, leaned his head against Sloane's thigh. Brandt looked at his dog, his retired military working dog who had survived 2 deployments and the transition to civilian life with considerably more difficulty than the paperwork had suggested, and felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight for a long time. There's a trail, he said, along the Rideau River. I've been walking him there in the mornings. It's good for the leg. The ground is soft. I go around 6. He stopped, started again. I'm not good at another stop. I thought maybe you'd want to come sometime. Sloane looked at him, at the careful, slightly strained way he was standing, which was the way a person stood when they'd said something that cost them something. Yeah, she said. I'd like that. They walked the Rideau River Trail on a Saturday morning in October, when the maples were going gold, and the air had that particular sharpness that meant the first frost wasn't far off. Kodiak moved between them with the easy, unhurried gait of an animal whose leg had healed and who had, somewhere in the past 3 weeks, decided that this new arrangement was acceptable. Brandt didn't talk much. Sloane had already understood this about him. He talked when he had something specific to say, and in between those times, he was just there, which was actually something she found easier than conversation for conversation's sake. They got to a clearing where the river came into full view, the water moving slowly in the gray morning light, and they stood there for a moment without saying anything. Then Brandt said, "My handler, in my unit, before I transferred to JTF2. He had a dog like Kodiak, same energy, same everything. His name was Rourke. He stopped. He was killed in 2016. The dog came back without him. He was looking at the river. I requested to take the dog when it was time for retirement. They said no, said it went against protocol, that MWDs go to their handlers first. Kodiak was different. His handler didn't have family. He was quiet for a moment. So I took him. Sloane said nothing. She knew this kind of story, had heard versions of it, had lived adjacent to the specific weight of it. She knew that what was required right now was not a response, just presence. After a while, she said, "Rourke, what was the dog's name? The original one? Ghost." He said it quietly. "Good name for a Mal." Something close to a smile moved across his face. It was Kodiak sat down between them and looked at the river. He had the satisfied expression of a dog who had worked out something important and was content with the result. Sloane reached down and put her hand on his head, and he leaned into it, steady and warm. "Thank you for telling me that," she said. Brandt didn't answer right away. Then, "You're easy to tell things to. People say that, do they? Occupational hazard," she said. "First it was the army. Now it's the animals." She glanced at him. "The animals are more straightforward." He looked at her then, really looked at her, in the direct, unhurried way that he did most things. "And the people?" She thought about it. "Some of them," she said, "are worth the extra work." The river moved past them, slow and silver and cold, and the maples dropped a few leaves onto the path, and Kodiak stood up and pressed himself against Brandt's leg for a moment. An old habit, checked in, then moved on, and then came back to Sloane's side, where he stayed. Brandt watched his dog make this decision. He did not say anything. But something in his face changed, quietly, the way things changed in him, without announcement, and he started walking again, and Sloane walked beside him, and Kodiak moved between them along the gold-lit trail, and none of them were in any particular hurry to reach the end of it.